Mm-hmm. Oh. Hello. Welcome to the first episode of the sleep series. This is a three-parter. I should probably leave these on, but for the sake of the video, I'll leave them off. Blue light blocking glasses. We'll talk about these in a little bit. As I was saying, this is part one of three. In this video, we are going to discuss the circadian rhythm, what type of person you are, whether you're a morning person or a nighttime person, the sleep cycle, how we can nail the sleep cycle to really get a great night's sleep. And the second episode, we're going to look into some top tips to improve your sleep. And then the third episode, to wrap it all up, we'll review some data tracking. So the reason it's all in this order is I don't want people to bypass and misunderstand any of the fundamental basics of sleep and just mask it with some form of supplementation. So a lot of what you'll be hearing in these videos is going to be cited from Dr. Matthew Walker's Why We Sleep. This is a fantastic read. I would highly recommend you grab a copy of this. It's quite scary reading through some of the information on how detrimental a lack of sleep can be to us. So this is a great read. The podcast with him and Joe Rogan is also really good, and he has a TED Talk on YouTube, about 20 minutes long. The Joe Rogan interview is about an hour and a half long, so if you're not really into reading, I'll link those interviews below in the comments so you can listen to them at any point and get some information from them. So we will start at the very beginning, which is going to talk about circadian rhythm. And that is essentially your biological clock. This is going to determine a lot, like when you want to sleep, when you have to go to the bathroom, when you want to eat, when you want to drink, your metabolism, your mood, your hormones, all for example. And what we're trying to do is be in as much sync as possible with our circadian rhythm as we can. We really want to keep our circadian rhythm very, very happy. And so by doing that, we can look at things like our body temperature and base what time we sleep on that. So for example, look at this graph, and throughout the day, our body temperature is going to increase, and then around 8 p.m. or so, you'll see here, our body temperature is going to dip all the way down throughout the night, and then start to increase again around 4 a.m. And this curve is going to occur regardless of you being asleep or not. So if you're having an all-nighter for whatever reason, whether it's for fun or you're having to work very late, this is going to happen. So your body would naturally dip into that colder state in order to initiate sleep. And that's just one of the biological factors that we're dealing with here. So essentially, we're trying to be in sync with that body, or that drop in body temperature, going to bed around that period of time. And you'll see on that graph, it's only a few degrees drop in body temperature. It's not like at 10 p.m. all of us start shivering and have to get the blankets out and turn the heat up. If you're someone that gets cold very easily, then you may feel this drop. Or if you're someone that's in the later stages of a contest prep where you're at a very, very low body fat percentage, you may feel this. Or if you're a night owl, you may feel that. Those are the people that like to stay up in the early hours of the morning. And touching on that, we can go into the next slide and see what type of person you are and your chronotype. So we can distinguish whether you're a morning lark or a night owl. So morning larks are going to make up about 40% of the population. And these are the individuals that like to wake up early, go to bed early. They function very well in the early hours of the morning. I would consider myself a morning lark. And then you have people who are night owls, which make up about 30% of the population. And what they like to do is go to bed in the early hours of the next day and wake up later. And stereotypically, night owls are seen as lazy just because they don't function very well in the morning, when unfortunately that's just their genetic makeup. So if your mom or dad, for example, is a night owl, then generally that's going to be transferred to you being a night owl. Is this something that you can change? I personally think so. For me being an example, in my earlier years, I was very much a night owl. And then as I got older and responsibilities changed, work life changed, I've morphed into more of a morning lark with those responsibilities I had to adjust to, like waking up at 4:30 in the morning, having to function very well in that first portion of the day, and that obviously made me start to go to bed by about 10 p.m. So unfortunately, the world that we live in is, especially if you work a 9 to 5, it's not very beneficial for night owls because their productivity just tends to come later on in the day, like around 11 a.m. or noon. So that first portion in that window of about 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., the night owls are still in that part of the day where they're just trying to get things clicking and going again. So what we can do now is look into the sleep cycle and how we can essentially improve that if you are a night owl. So the sleep cycle is roughly 90 minutes, and we go through different stages from wake to rapid eye movement or REM sleep, and then stages of NREM, which is stages 1 through 4. And what you'll see on this graph here is the first portion, get the mouse moving over here, the first portion you'll see is taken up by a majority of NREM, or your deep sleep, stages 3 and 4. And then we transition into waking up, and it's taken up by stages 1 through 2 of NREM. So you can see here, stages 1 through 2, all the way up till we wake up. And breaking that down a little bit further, your REM, your rapid eye movement, that's going to generally occur later at night, and that's responsible for your mood, your memory. Your stages 1 and 2 of NREM sleep is the majority of your night, and it's going to be responsible for your mental and physical restoration. And then NREM stages 3 and 4 is deep sleep. So that's going to tap into your physical recovery, your memory, and your learning. So if you've had a really good night's sleep and you wake up just feeling incredibly fresh, then there's a really high chance that you've had a lot of NREM sleep in stages 3 and 4. So what we don't want to do is be in a position where we wake up in those deep stages of sleep. You may have had this happen before, where you've been woken up by something like a noise or a dog, kids, significant other, whatever it is, while you're in a deep sleep. You wake up feeling really disoriented, and if you were to continue your day in that particular state, you're not going to function very well at all. So now, when we come towards waking up, we are in those stages of NREM 1 and 2. So generally, if we wake up in NREM 1 and 2, it's not too much of a problem. But we want to nail that sleep cycle so that we wake up at that point when we're ready to get on with the day. And we can do this through two things. We can use an app called Sleep Cycle. It's a really great app. It sets a marker between 6 a.m. and 6:30 a.m., for example, and based on how well you've slept throughout that night, it'll wake you up and your alarm will go off at the point of when you're about to wake up. So if you haven't got that app, for example, you can use something like going through just some basic knowledge and reviewing our sleep cycles. With the 90 minutes, we need 8 hours. That's a general recommendation. So 8 hours of sleep, that equates to 6 sleep cycles because that's 540 minutes. So if we're to take a night's sleep from 11 o'clock at night to 7 a.m., that would be 6 sleep cycles, and we would wake up feeling really good. And that's fantastic, but it takes on average between a lot of us around 20 to 30 minutes to actually get to sleep. So that 20 to 30 minutes for us to get into NREM stages 3 and 4 has to be taken into consideration. So what we don't want to do is be in a position where we're waking up halfway through our last sleep cycle and getting that disoriented type feeling that I was mentioning a second ago. So if we look at this graph here, if we go to bed, say around 11 o'clock, and we fall asleep at 11, that's great. We'll wake up at 7 a.m. feeling very fresh. But let's take into consideration that 20 to 30 minutes that it takes to actually get to sleep. So what you would then do is add that 20 to 30 minutes to your 8 hours of sleep. So generally what I tend to do, if I'm not using the Sleep Cycle app, I'll set my alarm for 8 hours and 20 minutes or 8 hours and 30 minutes. So if you have a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, and we'll go into technology more in the next episodes, those apps are synced to those pieces of technology, and you'll get the information that you need, and it'll give you a general idea night after night of how long it takes you to actually get to sleep. So you can kind of get a gauge of how long you need to actually fall asleep. So of that average, you would just add that on to your 8 hours of sleep. Mine is around 15 minutes. So like I mentioned earlier, I'll just add that extra 15 minutes on top of my 8 hours that is recommended for sleep. So that is pretty much everything covered for episode 1. So we've gone through our biological clock here with the circadian rhythm and how we can keep that intact as much as possible. We've looked into what type of person you are, whether you're a morning lark or night owl, and we've gone into the sleep cycle itself, going through the different stages of wake, NREM stages 1 through 4, and we've also looked into how we can nail that sleep cycle by setting your alarm using apps like Sleep Cycle, for example, or if you haven't got that to your availability, then you can use just basic logic of your 8 hours of sleep and then add on an additional 20 to 30 minutes of the time it takes you to get to sleep. So that is all from episode 1. I'm looking forward to seeing you in episode 2. If you have any questions at all, please put them in the comments below, and I'm happy to answer those there. Until next time, sleep well.